to commemorate the 1826 Weavers' Uprising and the massacre that took place here on the 26th of April 1826, 198 years ago. So we refer to this as the Uprising because what happened here nearly 200 years ago was largely motivated by desperation and starvation. So we're in the middle of an economic depression at that time. People were out of work, people were starving to death. They'd had decades of great hardship. They'd tried absolutely everything to have their voices heard. They'd tried petitioning, they'd tried strikes, they'd tried going to the local mill owners and asking for a decent wage. And then, when their children were dying and their family members were dropping dead and dying of starvation and related illnesses, they hatched a plan in February 1826 to have a targeted form of protest against the power looms across the whole of the area. Across 4 days, from the 24th of April to the 27th of April 1826, tens of thousands of local people gathered together and went round and destroyed nearly every single power loom in this area. On the first day, they started up towards Winnie Hill on the outskirts of Accrington and made their way through Oswald Twizel and down into Blackburn. The Riot Act was read a number of occasions on that day. Soldiers were present, and at the time people believed 3 people were shot dead in Blackburn, just near where Blackburn Cathedral is now. The uprising continued on the second day. This time it came from over Darwen and it went down through Hoddleston and up through Pickup Bank and ended up where we would today refer to as Helmshaw Textile Museum. Once again the Riot Act was read. There were arrests, including the arrest of what is now a well-known woman called Mary Hindle, who was actually taken even though she'd only been looking for a child, even though she wasn't involved in the protests at all. And she was taken down to the New Inn in Haslingden and followed by a crowd of hundreds who basically demanded that all the people were released. The soldiers were trigger happy, but Reverend Gray, who was a local magistrate, decided to release all the prisoners. And a massacre was narrowly avoided. On day 3, people came across from Rottenstall and Haslingden and across the tops here, up towards Edenfield, and then came down the route close to where we started on Chatterton Old Lane with the Samba Band. There, William Grant read the Riot Act. There was about 3,000 people coming down. Ultimately, when people got down to here, they were met by about 20 soldiers, 6 of the Duke of York Rifles just by Aikens and Lord's house there, which was the mill owner's house, and they fired 600 bullets into a crowd of 3,000. At least 6 people were shot dead, and I'll name those later. It was believed that 3 other dead bodies were found just over there on the side of the Irwell the following day, and there's reports of other people dying of their wounds. On the 4th day of the uprising, people came down from Tockholes on the other side of Darwen and down in towards Chorley. People by the end of this were exhausted. They were starving. They were basically kind of a desperate plea for people to help them, for people to avert a mass form of death due to starvation. That was the reasoning behind the kind of uprising more broadly. And yet, unfortunately, that was not averted. And there was, in the year following the uprising, there were thousands of people who died in this area due to starvation-related illnesses, including, in East Lancashire area, more than 1,300 children under the age of 5. And if you start looking at the older ages, that number increases exponentially. What we had then was a response here where people were absolutely desperate, trying to kind of send a message by destroying the power looms that they needed help and support. They were criminalised. They were defined in a moral language of rioters, which implies that they were the fault rather than the people who were firing the bullets at them, rather than the people who didn't help them and provide them support when they needed food. More than 60 people were prosecuted. 41 of those were given the death sentence. Of those 41, 31 later had that commuted to imprisonment, and 10, including Mary Hindle, were ultimately transported over to Australia. These kind of events were of enormous significance. They were referred to as the Lancashire Rising at the time. But as time's gone on, they've been distorted. They've been referred to as riots, which have placed the blame very much onto the protesters, the starving people. The notion of a massacre has been lost. Instead, as you can see on the sign there, they're referred to either as a riot or a fight. We need to reclaim that language. They don't call it an uprising, they call it the power loom riot, which again completely obfuscates any sense of an uprising, that people might be rationally motivated to actually stand up and say, no, we are in desperate need of help us now. We need to reclaim that history, and we need to remember it, and we need to remember the people who died here and the people who died elsewhere, including the people who died, as I mentioned, as the uprising spread into West Yorkshire and into North Manchester in early May 1826. For the rest of this this event, we're going to have a couple of readings and we're going to have a little bit of music. Okay, we've got another set of readings here from Clive. It will be David Whitehead.
Right, so this is the answer, is it? All this going on, all this bad work? Well, if it's the answer, what's it the answer to? Yeah, there's been bad crops, there's nobody got out to eat. Is that my fault? Is that Mr. Turner's fault? Is it Mr. Kay's fault? Have we got power or wind and rain and when the sun's gonna shine? No, but it's our looms that are laying in bits, isn't it? Yeah, it is. And what about the price of bread? I know, it's the devil's work, the price of bread. But that's the politicians, for their aims, for their crops, or their make it brass. It's not our fault. Yet you're taking it out on us. Now then, I've seen somebody at Crad somewhere. Where's he gone? There! Lol, Clegg, come. Never mind skulking at back there, lol. What's he got in the hand? That's a cudgel that's got in the hand there. Nah, that's a right mon there. I always took thee for a steady mon. What would you say, seeing you with these lots here? I tell you what and all, lol. Last Sunday, we happened Longholm Chapel there, down in Rattenstall. What a lovely day. Praising the Lord, and you stood with the Bible in your hand. And now you've got a cudgel smacking this up to bits. When me, Brother Peter and Brother Thomas set up at Balladin Brook, lol there, we put rovings out to him. And he's a good waver, I'll tell you, for now. He was doing at least six pieces a week, and we paid you 2 shillings 6pence for each piece. Worse brass. Now we've got to bad times, because bad times come, you've now put aside. And that's the trouble with your work people. When living's good, spend, spend, spend. Then bad times come, and you can't bide. Not at all. So you're striking poverty. Poverty, hard times, we've got them. And what about my work people? What about Mr. Turner's work people? Mr. Aitken's work people? Those who were loyal? Well, they're going to be climbing and starving, aren't they? Who's going to feed their children now? Well, I tell you what, I'm done with a lot of you. But we've had a word with magistrates and they agree as well. Your lot are going to pay for every power loom in this county. It's going to come out of your pocket, not ours. And what I say about education is them that pay for their own education learns a lot more. I'm done with it. Today's event it wasn't, but they really are how David Whitehead felt when you look at his diaries and things. And it's a good idea of how the mill owners and the magistrates did feel as well. I'd like to introduce you to a couple of the organisers, especially David, who's really behind the Uprising 2000. The bicentennial. We've had a few bad words, I'll tell you. Are you happy with how it's gone today, David, with the turnout?
I think it was fabulous. I mean, I didn't make a count of the numbers, but it looked pretty big, and of course we've still got all the people in the church hall as well, so my guess would be post 100, but
120 I'd say.
You think?
120.
I like a big crowd and I can recognise numbers quite well.
So I think that's amazing, because we were hoping to get about 100, and I thought the singing was wonderful, the band was brilliant, the samba band was great, the readings were just phenomenal, and I think you could just see that people were really engaging with it, and I think it'll be it's a really great event.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Thanks for getting it all going.
No problem, my friend.
Right, David. I have been wondering, what's the idea of the coffin which is full of bread?
Okay, well, this is a historical protest, anti-starvation protest from 1826 itself. So when some of us were doing the archival work, looking into the Weavers' Uprising and the Chatterton Massacre, we found an account of a coffin filled with bread being carried through the streets of Blackburn in the weeks following the uprising.
Right.
So we decided to actually have a coffin made. We had this here last year as well, and we've had people making the bread and then glazing it with yacht varnish and other forms of varnish. So we can actually keep this, and hopefully this will actually go into a museum along with the Rise Up banner that James Fox made for us. So what the meaning behind this was, there's three things really. First of all, the coffin itself represented death.
Yeah.
So it was basically the indication of starvation and the fact that actually there was mass starvation and mass death in the area. The bread was obviously indicating the food, or in this context, the absence of food, the bellies of the dead people.
Yeah.
So if that bread had been in the kind of people, they wouldn't need a coffin.
No.
And then we've put the rose on the top, because basically that gives the indication of what we call as bread and roses, which is a shorthand way of saying a dignified life.
Right.
And one of the key things that the protesters were trying to do was obviously fight against starvation, but also fight for a dignified life. So this is symbolic of the time, and we don't know if this happened elsewhere. People think there may have been protest coffins similar to this during the Irish potato famine in the 1840s, but perhaps the bread in the coffin anti-starvation protest symbol began here in East Lancashire.
Tell you where there was another one, David, when the Liverpool-Manchester Railway opened, and Wellington was one of the dignitaries on the train, and there was a dead weaver in a coffin as part of the protest in Manchester.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's not an isolated incident.
It's not. So it's obviously a way of actually kind of sending a message. But this itself, I'd say, for anti-starvation, and we would hope that people today who are fighting against food poverty would kind of maybe draw some inspiration from this. That actually people were fighting and protesting against those kind of things. And these kind of things, we obviously carried this, and we don't know if it's the first time it's ever been used since the 1820s, but we do know that this is certainly something which actually we'd like to kind of put in the spotlight, because it is really significant to highlight the starvation angle.
Yeah, it's brilliant, David. And when I said they had a dead weaver at Manchester, he was an actor.
Oh,
they didn't drag and dig one up, you know what I mean?
That's good to hear.
Get a lad dressed up as a dead body.
I'm sure there's many a fine actor over here too. I don't think you fit in there though, Clive.
Oh, no. Thanks, David.